Welcome back, everybody. A look to the future. That's the video for today. Vocabulary, multinational corporations, and social media. Read through those to understand and then move forward. The economy in the 21st century. The economy is a very globalized one in this day and age. It is based largely around multinational corporations. So you'll have a head office in one country, but then there are factories all across the world for that in particular company. During this time, the service sector has expanded very much so. And what you see with the service sector that range from lawyers and doctors to other positions such as teachers and fast food workers, you see some of the highest paid and some of the lowest paid professions in the service sector. This is also a time of the rise of tech giants such as Apple and Amazon, etc. On top of this, we also have seen more recently a decline in organized labor. There are times in history where we see that decline and then we see a bounce back, and there's more participation in organized labor. This is one of those times where there is less participation in organized labor. As for immigration in the United States, recently in the past few decades, there's been an easing of restrictions on immigration. The Immigration Act of 1990 actually increased quotas by 40%, and that helped the United States achieve some of the largest immigration numbers in the 1990s and the 2000s. In 2018, 25% of the total immigrant population were Mexican. The second largest population source was the Asian immigrant population. Those statistics that I just pointed out can be seen within this chart. The Asia and Oceania population, immigrant population, that is, like I said, the second largest group. But immigration from the Americas is headed by the Mexican immigrant population, but the Americas does include any immigration from North America and South America. As immigration changes some of the dynamics or demographics, rather, of the United States, there are other demographics changing as well. One would be the dynamics of the family. In 1960, there are 70% of American families, or 70% of American families are headed by a working father and a non working mother. In 2018, that would only be 15% of families. Wow. Additionally, one in three marriages at this time in 2018 end in divorce. So if you get married, 33% chance of that ending in divorce. Additionally, and this has been brought up in previous units, specifically the Great Depression unit, life expectancy for Americans is going up. It's almost at 80. And one of the things that complicates is Social Security. The baby boom population, which is rather large, has mostly reached retirement age. This, coupled with low birth rates, are with birth rates that are declining, uh, questions whether or not Social Security is going to be viable much longer or what should be done to keep it viable. Finally, 2013, same sex marriages would be legalized. This would be done through a couple of different court cases. This once again continues the change as far as what the dynamics of families in the 21st century look like compared to families in decades past. Due to more frequent hurricanes, desertification, drought, wildfires, because of issues such as these, there has been a push often across the globe for more involvement in climate control agreements. So the United States has sometimes participated in that, sometimes it has not. But this is some because of issues such as those already mentioned, the interest in countries doing something about it has increased. There's also been an uptick in green architecture and other green measures, including the resurgence of the electric car, which was around a long time ago, but never really took off. That is changing. And then in the United States specifically, we do see some issues such as California and the scarcity of water that exists there. In 2021, the war in Afghanistan came to an end. This marked the end of the longest war the United States has ever fought. Additionally, the war in Afghanistan really is what kicked off the war on terror. So, 20 years later, approximately, the war came to an end. And this gives us a chance to reflect on the war on terror on the whole and whether or not what advantages there have been in fighting this war and what disadvantages there have been. One of the key things to consider is whether or not the war has turned people away from terrorism or if it has pushed people toward terrorism. That's a really important distinction to make because if the war has only pushed more people into a position where they would be more apt to conduct terrorism, then that is very problematic, of course. Social media and its popularity has only continued to grow and has had a larger and larger impact on our lives. Some of the cons, however, of social media have to do with addiction, have to do with increased depression and anxiety, specifically in young people, young teens, young adults. And then also on social media platforms, people receiving one sided information and how this has contributed to the closed mindedness of people. And all that falls back to algorithms and what algorithms seek to achieve. Finally, in 2022, Russia, a world superpower and a power with nuclear weapons, decided to invade Ukraine, and this disregarded Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. It falls back on some level to Putin thinking that Ukraine and its people are one in the same with Russia. And undeniably, there is a linked history between the two regions. However, this disregards Ukraine's strong interest in being its own separate nation. The war itself that is currently being conducted in 2022, the war brings about many different considerations for the future. Some of those thoughts include, countries in Europe and their interest in being in the European Union, being in NATO. This will bring up, this war has brought up ideas of whether or not a country should or should not be in NATO to receive protection. Keep in mind, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization formed after World War II and during the Cold War. Ukraine is not a country in that agreement. Would it reflect differently? Will it change its mind and say that it definitely should be a part of NATO in the future, depending on what the future holds? Additionally, in World War One, we saw the alliance system and how that ended up creating a very large war. Well, does a pact like NATO, does a pact like the European Union Does that accomplish the same thing? Is that it's a peacetime treaty and alliance system, so depending on what happens next in Europe, would that create another large scale war? Lastly, the idea of nuclear weapons and if a country would be willing to use them, if it would a country use them just as an aggressor? Would a country use them in response? Is there a point where you choose not to use them no matter what? A lot of those questions have resurfaced at this point with this invasion and war that is being conducted against Ukraine. That's it. We'll see you next time.